Okay, hello everybody. Thanks once again for joining me in my channel. And today, in this video session or podcast session, I have a very special friend, a very special guest, Chris Womack. I will let him introduce himself in a second, but the topic for today is going to be how we as men deal with the expectations that society have about masculinity, the expectations that society have as our role as men. Uh, and we are very fortunate here because Chris and I, we go way back. We have a good friendship, and also we have very different backgrounds, right? So hopefully we're gonna talk about our stories a little bit. And of course, everybody who is watching us, please leave your comments, and I will then later answer in the comment section. But please consider, of course, this is a conversation that does not limit the topic, right? We just want to open some doors of the topic, open for more debate, because we acknowledge that our experience as men are particular, right? And they do not explain all the experience that are out there. So we want to hear from you guys that are watching us, insights and points of view that they will have based on this conversation. So, um, Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. And please, if you can say a few words about yourself, and then we're gonna move on to the conversation.
Daniel, thank you for having me. And this is definitely an interesting conversation and one that's commonly held in barbershops, street corners, other places. And is always interesting to hear the perspective of others on this topic itself. As you said, my name is Chris Womack. I grew up in Philadelphia. I like to think of I have a sort of a eclectic mix that I didn't come from a very um, well-established socioeconomic background. Um, so I come from that perspective, but also from the other side of it, where I've been able to accomplish some things professionally and academically, from having uh, multiple graduate degrees and a PhD and been published. So I see things from different lenses from that perspective, and also from that of a African American man as well, and hoping to add a different lens to this conversation. But also, with all conversations, look to learn as well. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about your journey and my journey. And since I know you, I'm very excited to hear about your experience, not only as you with yourself, but you have done a lot of work talking to other men and understanding how some expectations from society, some self-awareness that we end up having sometimes open possibilities, but they could also close possibilities for things in our lives, right? So maybe we start there in the sense that if you can tell us a little bit about your creation, your education, the environment in where you develop as a kid, and how all of this framed in your mind, in your way of being, this role of a man, right? What is to be a man? What are the expectations that others have towards you? And what are the expectations you feel that you need to deliver when you embrace that role of a man? So maybe we start there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, looking at my upbringing, when I look at my upbringing, I look at the community as a whole, not only just family, but those external and those you interact with. But growing up, two-parent household, mom and dad. Dad was a laborer. Mom was a laborer as well. Um, Number of uncles and everyone else, and a lot of them were military served, and also worked as well. So I had that perspective. Many of them were uh, fine athletes as well during their time as well. So from that perspective, and then from the community side, also looking at the streets were a tough area. So growing up in the streets, and I've also noticed that from others from different socioeconomic backgrounds, the the layers of masculinity and how you're defined are very different layers. Before it was very, I wouldn't say it was very clear cut, but it was always sort of that mindset. Looking at cavemen, and even from the old adage and the old tapes of Tarzan, me Tarzan, or some of the old movies where you see that the man was sort of the powerful individual, trying to enforce rules, or the case may be. But growing up, it was one of which, um, from a I don't know if I would say it was a masculinity side or more of a man side. It was more humanistic side first, and then it just sort of integrated into the masculinity side. And what I mean by that was first, your core responsibility was to your family. So that's always sort of edged in you, not only from direct conversations, but being a young kid. Not sure how you grew up, Daniel, but I know when we grew up, we were to be seen and not heard as children, the mindset. So you sat and listened, you did not interrupt adults, and you would watch them interact. And I was with my dad a lot. So you would sit and listen to these men talk, and you would hear them talk about long day work, bringing whatever earnings they had home to the family to make sure we're fed and everything else. So it always from that mindset of the family first, that responsibility. They didn't talk about yourself after that. You just took what you had, put on the table. So you could eat, clothing, education, and then whatever fun you could find as a male, which usually wound up being, um, maybe some men going on drinking or watching sports on TV. You hear a lot of banter about sports, with that perspective. So you will learn really by initially watching and not being told. Um, so also integrity was huge. You always hear a man say, "I'm a man of my word."
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So that was one of those normal things you always hear. I'm a man of my word. So a lot was based on that. Especially in the African American community, because some felt I didn't have much else. So if you didn't have much else, what did you have? You had your word.
Mm.
So your word was integrity, and you lived off that. Also, how you treated others, and also that protector side came in different ways. How one might protect another. One male might be more physically imposing or whatever than someone. So sometimes they play the role of protectors of others.
Mm-hmm.
Some might be a little bit more intellectually gifted or knowledgeable, and they might use that to help someone else. Maybe it's with doing bills or taxes or things like that. Um, some might have other skills, where it's sort of a barter system. You might have someone that was gifted with auto mechanics,
Mm.
and they will help the other person with their car. And then another person might be gifted with doing brick pointing or handiwork, and they will help the other person um, at the house. So you sort of watch this interaction take place, and that sort of help you to define your I guess your masculine identity. I think
Mm-hmm.
I look at it more than the human side more than anything, but it was more of a masculine identity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was part of it. I think I answered your
Yes.
questions on that.
Yes. And it's so beautiful because as you were speaking, I'm kind of imagining this scenario, you sitting down with your dad and with your uncles and kind of watching the conversation. And this is so true, right? I mean, I do have young kids, and they learn by observing, right? They learn by observing. And I remember my journey. It's so interesting, Chris, because this is something I say in the channel many times, regardless of our cultural differences, right? and the race difference, and the fact that you were born in Philly, I was born in São Paulo, Brazil, like different countries and things like that. But as you were telling your story on the influences and the expectations about being a man, I saw so many things in common, right? So for me, it was a lot about, I really remember my dad in many moments telling me, look, you need to take care of your family, right? It's a lot about take care of your family, take care of others, take care of your younger brother, right? Take care of your mom. If like my dad had to travel sometimes, and even like being a teenager, hey, you are the man of the house, right?
Yeah.
So that is very, very common. But at the same time, it's interesting the difference, because you said you had family members, they were more like athletes, or they went to the army, right? My dad was definitely not an athlete, but he did serve the army in Brazil in a very complicated time in our history, where we had a military government and things like that. So he stayed just 1 year. But I think some of that attitude and like the ethical standards from an organization like the forces, the armed forces, I think was very positive for us in terms of values. And you say, don't lie, be kind to others. Uh, so I think there's a beauty in all of that, right? What we can learn from you know, our parents, our grandparents, our uncles, and all of that. So there is this beautiful lessons of life, right? Um, so do you see today, you keep transferring this to the next generation, like with your, I don't know, kids or no siblings? Is that still present? Or, and I'm putting the question out there because I feel that maybe we do that in a family level, but I think society overall, it's a little bit more like individualistic now. And I think people are more on the, I can sort it out by myself. Or even like, oh, the weekends, let's get together as a family, is not as common as it used to be. I don't know if you agree with me. And how do you see this moving forward, this example of sharing, let's say, if we can call best practices, right, or role models in life to the next generations? Do you see this is still happening, or not?
Well, that's a very interesting question looking at today's society. And is today's society similar to what, I grew up in or what you grew up in? Definitely not. Um, and I think the difficulty exists in transferring a lot of that information to our younger kids. Can it be done? Definitely. And the reason why I say the difficulty exists, there are many more distractions today than they were at that point. The distractions pretty much come in this thing, you know. Um, when you interacted with a male adult, you interacted. Um, like as a man, I was taught to address another man, especially those who were older, as yes sir or mister. To to this day, there are still uh, older neighbors who still exist. You never call them by their first name. That was like the highest insult
Mm.
to call someone. If someone was um, Jeff Johnson, and then all of a sudden I start calling him Jeff, no, that's Mr. Johnson. So even to this day, is Mr. Johnson. Those values are hard to transfer over to the kids because one, they're inundated from TikTok and Instagram and other social media, and they're bombarded with images where sometimes this dialogue doesn't exist. There's either a series of insults to someone older, uh, or insults to your peer. Um, and it's constantly being fed. And you can look at this 24/7. You get it in the morning, you get it in the afternoon, you get it in the evening. You peek at this constantly, but there's no one to tell you right from wrong or really give you any context. At least when I saw another man on the street. Um, and this is someone that probably my father knew or whatever, and this person knew me as the son of, my dad. I always addressed them as Mister or Sir
Mhm.
because I did not want that to get back to my father as saying, your son called me by. That's again, it was like an insult. Um,
Mhm.
so today, some kids have it. They acquire this. It's tough, but there's an ability to get through the noise from the social media. Also, the family unit is not the same. I mean, even though my parents worked and I was sort of a latchkey kid where I would let myself in at home, at least on the weekends or whatever, we had dinner together. You know, um, or there would be other people joining us for dinner at the table, and or if there were more people, there was the adult table and there was the kids table where the younger ones would sit, where adult conversation would take place. And you'd be in earshot distance and hear, but you would still be able to watch that interaction. Today, that doesn't exist in the same fashion. And I'm speaking from my lens, from what I've seen in my old neighborhood growing up and watching people and watching my peers who were kids, and do they replicate what their parents showed them? And some of them don't. Um, some do and some don't. So it's hard to replicate that when you know you have a better chance meeting your kids in line at the Apple store for the newest Apple release than it is to get them to sit with you for dinner, um, and have a conversation. Um, and again, those are missed opportunities because the kids don't have a chance to talk to, it's not only that their dad and their uncles are understanding masculinity, or being a male, those social norms associated with it, and not just the social constructs built around it that may not be the correct version. So they don't even have anyone to offer them sort of the correct version
Mm.
of how to view that.
Mhm.
Um, so to your point, um, I would definitely say it does exist today as it did then. And I know things evolve and change, but the tool that are used to influence and that the kids are around more are, again, TikTok, Instagram, whatever you're on there, Discord, discussions. Um, yeah, they that influences them, and sometimes they learn the wrong things. There's no one there to sort of right the ship. To say, no, you don't call him Jeff. That is Mr. Johnson.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if the man was the biggest wino on the corner. Probably worked, probably drank or whatever, and somewhat disheveled. But know what? At the end of the day, you call him Mr. or Sir.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think you are bringing such an important topic because it reminds me the social media. I totally agree. Like it's because of the business model, right? I mean, the business model to fight for attention and to make sure people are glued on their screens all the time. It's really, I think, leveraging on the worst of people, which is the conflict, which is the extremisms, which is the blame, right? It's always that thing, and I always invite people to do a test. Like if you have an Instagram account or a TikTok account, try to post a picture of a beautiful day, right? And say, look at how beautiful is the day today. Look at that tree, or look at the sky. It's so blue, or beautiful sunshine. You're not gonna get any likes. right? You're not going to get any hearts. But if you post something extremist and something that brings, hate and, racism things and things like that, or fake news, you're going to get thousands of likes, right? And so I always recommend people to watch, if you have not watched yet, guys, a documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. It's amazing. It won multiple awards, and it's really, it is a eye-opening to all of us who have kids, right? Because I think there is a way to use social media, yes, but we need to be very careful because we don't have any kind of regulations yet, right? So it reminds me the time of, even when I was a kid, it was very common to watch commercials about cigarettes, right? I was watching a cartoon, right, in Brazil when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, and then in the middle of the cartoon, the commercials were about cigarettes and things like that. Something that today is unthinkable, right? But I think social media is still in that era of 40 years ago where there's no regulation at all, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think also with social media, and to be fair and honest, even in our era, going back before social media, there were individuals and um, that behaved badly under the guise of masculinity. But there was always some type of social conscience to help to guide you. That social conscience could be an uncle, father, or something like that. You see another man beating up another person. Doesn't matter who that person could be, a woman, another man, child, whatever. And my man would have that, you as a son with them, or me as a son with them, or nephew, and say, you don't do that. That is not how uh, men behave. You know, um, you've heard the phrase, people say, be a man about it. Sometimes it's used in a good way, sometimes it's used in a bad way. But early on, before social media, you had that social conscious. Now, the social conscious is the social media. So what you just saw in the clip of TikTok, as you mentioned, the social conscious is how many likes does it get? So, how masculine is defined in some instances is how many women you have, or how fast does your car go, or showing you fighting some other person and beating them up. Take for instance, um, Will Smith and Chris Rock.
Mm.
An act of violence for no reason. Well, for whatever reason he might think it occurred, but still have that reason. So you have someone bigger go to someone smaller and strike them. And then some people felt they were okay with that. So social media became the social conscious and saying, well, he was being a man, and saying, being the man how to go strike another person. So during our time period, there was some type of social conscious to help guide us along, and that was through interaction, probably with other men, while certain activity was taking place, whatever. And they said, "No, what? That's not good. You don't do that," or "I don't want you to do that." Or you might even have men even go to you and say, "I've had uncles who said that says, do as I say, not as I do." So that was pretty much saying, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but you don't do it. That was a guy. So going to social media, there is no social conscience except for, like you said, how many likes that you get.
Yeah. And you are bringing such an important distinction, right? Because I think it explains a lot of our crisis, which is for many people out there, we are replacing teachers, we are replacing mentors, we are replacing parents, we are replacing role model by celebrities, right? So their teachers become the celebrities, and the celebrities, to this point, they are just, their only goal is to make money out of those platforms and to get likes. So I've seen over and over again the celebrities, even the ones that started doing posts and things in a with some positive goal in mind, they end up being hijacked by their audience, right? Because the audiences end up wanting more and more of the extremism, and then they realize the same. They realize, oh, so I need to produce content that are more on the extremist side to get more likes, right? I mean, and one clear example to me, even like is not related to education, but it's a great example about this phenomenon. Like, it's a channel that I follow in Brazil. It's a very famous channel about airplanes and aircrafts, and this channel was developed by a person who used to be a United Airlines mechanic, and he knows a ton about airplanes, and he created the channel as a sideline business, and the channel exploded. Like, now he has like 2 million viewers, 2 million subscribers, and he knows so much. So he explains exactly, how this Boeing 777 works, or and what's the difference between Boeing and Airbus and everything. And it was an amazing channel. I think it still is a great channel. But more recently, I noticed he's been posting only videos about crashes, and about accidents. And instead of saying, you know what, the capabilities of the flight or the capabilities of the aircraft, right, of the technology. Because probably he noticed this, oh, every time I post a video about a technology, I get 100,000 likes. If I post a video about an accident, I get millions of likes, right? So, and then I start to realize people complaining to him in the channel say, look, I thought this was a channel about technology and, the passion, the love we have for flying. And now this channel is becoming a channel about accidents. And so it's so interesting, right?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I think it becomes the part where our mentality has shifted a bit, where we used to be interested more in the how. Like, how does that work? How do we get to this place? Um, the general how. Now it's become the what. And the what has become glittered and glorified or whatever, um, as opposed to what it actually is supposed to mean. Um, and what I mean by that is, if I think about some of the earlier days in electronics, where you would see kids really invested in um, how electronic boards work, how to make a radio, how to make a TV, how it was understanding how that worked to get that certain output. Now everyone wants to get to the what, the outcome, the end, and then not only the outcome, but how can I make it bigger? How can I make it better? As opposed to, hey, I just made a radio. It gets all these stations overseas and everything. As opposed to, oh, look, I made this radio station. Hey, it talks about murder and rape and all this, and they glorify that side of it as opposed to the work that was gone into building the radio in the first place. If that makes sense. So we've come more focused on the what. That's how look at social media. It's the what. What's being put out. What is it saying? You know, um,
Yeah.
how's it being displayed? You think about clickbaits and things of that nature. Even if you look at clickbaits now and you go to a YouTube or other sites, they're playing on constructs of masculinity.
Mm.
You know,
Mhm.
you'll look at, um, there was one I was filtering through, and more or less looking at technology things, which I don't know how the thing got in my feed. And they were talking about, um, building muscle fast, and they had all these men with very huge muscles, and they would talk about going on a liver diet or a raw meat diet or whatever.
Mhm.
And if you click on there, they would talk about basic diet things, but they played on that construct of showing these images of these huge guys with huge muscles and everything else. And oh, I'm gonna click on that. Just like one that says, oh, let's show you how to attract more women faster. And oh, wow, click on that. It's that image they put up, the play on that masculinity, those social constructs associated around that.
Yes, yes, and this is so important. You're bringing such a deep perspective here, because I think people tend to take it for granted, right? Oh, look at that! I can build some muscles fast. But to your point, what is the assumption? So the assumption is basically telling us and telling the user that, look, to be a man is to be strong, right? And to be strong, you need to have muscles. And to be a man is to, be able to be admired by women, right? And you're only going to be admired by women if you have a fit body, or if you have a strong body and things like that. And this is such a limited view, right? It's such a limited and narrow view of masculinity, because it doesn't take into account emotional intelligence, it doesn't take into account empathy, it does not take into account, I think, an overarching topic that is missing here, and is a syndrome of this crisis, which is virtues, right? Virtues, like what is the goal of life, right? Is it to have muscles? Is it to be admired by women as a man? Is it to make money? Is it to be rich, successful? Fine, it could be some of that, but, or could I say the goal of a life is to have virtues, right? And among other things, of course, to have a good life, to make the world a better place, right? To learn from others, to contribute. So this other perspective adds so much value, so much more value, and kind of opens the debate on what is the role of a modern man, right? So maybe we enter in that space. To you, how do you see the man in this 21st century, in terms of, maybe we can talk a little bit, about the struggles as well, right? Because there's lots of struggles. And before we jump into some of the expectations, for this more, if I could say, more evolved man, right? The man who really sees his value as broadly as a virtuoso person. Maybe we can talk, before that, we can talk a little bit about the struggles. And because I heard a lot from you in the beginning, this beautiful heritage you got from your dad, you got from your uncles, you got from your dad's friends, on how to be a man, which is beautiful, and there's so many light and positive values there. But I imagine there was some struggles as well, right? And maybe I start on my end, which to me the struggles was a little bit about, okay, Dad, I get it, I need to take care of others because I am a man, right? Although nowadays I question that. But at that time when I was a kid, I didn't have the ability to question. So I said, I got it, I have this. But now the questions become much more, okay, so I need to take care of others, but how can I take care of myself? Because if I don't know how to take care of myself, how can I take care of others, right? So this was, for example, one of the struggles I had throughout my teenager years mainly, right? And early in my career, I would say, in my 20s, in my early 30s. I think now at past 40, I think that chapter in life, it's gone, and I have some answers, but I struggle a lot with that for many, many years. How can I take care of myself instead of just being worried about taking care of others? But I don't know, maybe open for you. I don't know if this was a struggle you had or any other struggles you had.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. And I think all men go through that struggle at some point in time, or even you go through different levels of it. And you think about yourself being a child and riding a bike. You're riding a bike and you fall, and you're about to have tears, and someone says, "Be a man, don't cry." So that becomes ingrained in you, saying, that you can't show emotion, that, if you're hurt, you can't talk about it, but you can express anger because you can fight or do whatever. So that was more tolerated than expressing hurt. So, and also the masculinity part of, wanting to be liked or valued, and an easy view of it. Think of uh, going out to a playground to play basketball, and someone's picking sides. That person who's the captain, what are they going to look for? They're looking for skill, ability, size, or whatever. They may not know anything about you, but take that tall one, pick this one, or whatever the case may be. So it's those visible attributes. But that also sort of defines masculinity, where we want to have that outward appearance of something. It doesn't always have to be in the physical stature of height, but how muscular we are, how tough we can look, or whatever. And we all sort of battle with that. Um, and it might shift as we get older, whatever it might do from a career perspective. Um, you deal with that. I know from an African American perspective, it might even be from interactions with law enforcement, when they feel they try to take away your masculinity by maybe putting you in cuffs or reducing you to a lower level based upon their authority. So I think we all deal with it, and we find a way to adjust to it. I think what has been great has been now talking about mental health, um, especially with men, because um, there's a lot of things that men keep bottled up. As I would conduct sessions on prostate cancer screening and talk with men with prostate cancer, or coming in the middle of prostate cancer, been diagnosed, or um, just wanting to learn, and the things that come up doing it about this fear that men are not supposed to be weak. We're supposed to be tough. So how do you be tough? You don't go to the doctor. So if you don't go to the doctor, you don't know, you don't have anything. Or if you do have something, what do? You keep it a secret. You don't tell anyone until you just look so frail and sick, and then it just comes out. So it's that mindset, and that masculine part of hiding things is sort of ingrained in us growing up. But I think in this society, which is weird, even with this social media side of it, men are more open to share their feelings, um, their disappointments. Um, because that was rare for a man to share disappointments. The only time we really saw disappointments if we were watching an athletic event and our team lost. You know, from playing soccer, if our favorite player missed the winning goal, the disappointment there. If we were playing football when our guy fumbled the ball or something like that, you saw it. You sort of felt that disappointment, but it was never really talked about. Now people are talking about their disappointment, and I think it gives men an avenue to release. Um, and but the most important thing, I believe, with the um, topic of masculinity and sharing information is that we share it with each other, as opposed to maybe a wife or a significant other. That's a different type of it. But when you share in that circle, you'll find it. You know, um, this happened to me today, and I just don't feel so great, and just feeling tough today. And someone in that circle might say, "Hey, you know what? That happened to me last year, and these are the steps I took to help correct it." Or that happened to me last year, and then the amazing thing, a better opportunity came around. So for that masculine side of keeping things inside, we're not able to share a lot of things about experiences, and other things that others can share their experience. Hey, this is what happened to me, and occur. So that discussion and dialogue is important. We talk about everything else. We'll talk about um, who is the best soccer player, Who was the best cricket player, the best batsman, who was the best football player, and argue to death who had the best stats. And we know the stats in everything. We know their number. We know where they played at, all this kind of information. But when it comes to talking about ourselves, it gets super quiet. I've noticed that again from experience, talking about prostate cancer.
Mm.
And men would be in barbershops and they'll talk about boxing and how many titles Ali had and which was his strongest shot and who would win, Ali or Tyson. And everyone would give their point of view. And now you say, hey, does anyone know their PSA number?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Silence.
Mm.
And I think I spoke to you one time before. I had a gentleman come and talk to me after I left out from the shop and said, hey, that was interesting what you were talking about, just to let you know, prostate cancer survivor and going through this. It was great that he felt comfortable enough to talk to me, but it'd been even great if he shared that in their room as well. So, to your point, Dan, I hope I didn't go too far off track.
No,
But
absolutely not.
just being able to have men share and again, I try to make men tell the men it's not a weeping session; it's an experience session.
Mm-hmm.
The same experience we share is, hey, I changed the carburetor out of a Camaro and put this carburetor now it goes faster. The same type of experience we're sharing here. Hey, I tried for this job and it didn't pan out, but I saw this other job and applied for it. And I did this and I got that. So that level of masculinity, or or just it's even more important now for the masculinity side in terms of really talking about health issues too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally. I'm so happy you're bringing that because Chris, guys, he's very humble, but he's done an amazing work that became like a PhD thesis and interviewed like thousands of men. So at some point, we're going to leave our contacts here, but if you want to talk to him about his work, is amazing. And we can keep going, and there's a lot more to explore in terms of, this work involves not only the challenge of masculinity and how men face, how men deal with the expectations from society. For example, I need to be strong, therefore I should not share my problems, versus, well, I think I'm going to benefit if I share, right? And it takes to that point up to the point of health disparities, right? Because the way black men face a disease like prostate cancer and the healthcare system, is different than what affects white men. So reach out to Chris. We're going to leave the contacts at the end, but I want to take us into the closing, asking you a little bit about, and I'm going to make my comment before I pass to you, but I do see, guys, and one of my invitations to all of you watching this video is, at the end of the day, the expectations that society, your parents, your mentors had about you being a man are just expectations, right? And I think as you get older, you start to look at those things and say, fine, this is good for me, I'm going to keep it. That expectation does not work for me anymore, I'm going to let go, right? And for me, a lot of my process, my self-awareness process and development process has been about that in the last years. For example, yes, there's an expectation I'm going to be the provider for my family. I get that, but I don't need to be the only provider, or I need to share things with my wife, and she's my partner as well. On the other hand, the idea, and I heard that from my dad as well, like, hey, boys don't cry, I mean, you are a man, you should not cry. Why not? So I let that go, because at the end of the day, I do have emotions, right? Or a lot of what I learned in my childhood about, man, don't ask for help, because you need to be strong, you need to be the provider. Why not? I mean, I can ask for help. So my invitation to all of you is that you start looking at expectations about masculinity and revisiting those expectations, right? And start to frame in a way what works for me and what does not work for me, right? maybe we can pass to you, so we do a close to hear a little bit about your personal journey, right? In revisiting these expectations, what have you learned about things that work for you, of being a man, and expectations that you don't want to act on that anymore because it does not serve you up.
That's an interesting question and appropriate way to close out. I think as I became older, I looked at masculinity as an intersection of integrity and humanity, as opposed to when they say masculinity is just this male part, but it's so many layers composed of that. And I think one of the things that no longer became a part of me, and that was even years and years ago, about the masculinity part, was not worrying if I had to be the most powerful person in the room, strength wise. Again, growing up in the city, growing up in the neighborhood I grew in, strength was key. Anyone saw you were weak, they were going to pounce on you. So you had to walk with an air of confidence and an air of, if you're going to mess with me, you're going to have some problems. You might win, but you're going to have some problems. Or you might lose and you're really going to have some problems. So that goes away actually very quickly, especially as you start mixing with other people or whatever. But it still stays in your back of your mind. We had to get away from the concept of being the strongest person, um, and just be the most empathetic person. I think that has become a lot more of my makeup. Even going years back, even now, that when I speak and interact with people is more from an area of empathy, because I think from a male perspective, sometimes men feel that people don't hear them. So if you go to another man, and if I know a guy and I've done it for a while and they're acting a little differently, instead of me saying, "Are you good?" So that's now the more mental side of it, saying, "Are you good?" Everyone's not going to sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I'm good." I'm gonna go there and say, "Hey, you look a little sluggish today. You're usually pretty energetic. What can I help with?" And even if they feel they're not going to peel back that information, I become intrusive. And I'll talk about, hey, I had a really tough day today, and this. And I'll start talking about myself to get them to open up, and then they start talking. So I learn in order. It's not always for me to go to Daniel to find out what's on Daniel's mind, but to tell Daniel what's been going on in my day, and then maybe Dan say, hey, I've been going through this, and this happened. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And it's not always for me to give a solution. It's for me to listen. And then maybe you come back and say, hey, what do you think? And maybe I'll give something small, but something, hey, I don't know exactly how to give you advice on this, but what I can do is make sure my mobile phone is open when you want to call me, you want to go grab a beer or a slice of pizza, and we can chat some more too about this so it doesn't wear on you. So I think the empathy side has engulfed me. And that's what I probably focus on more now with individuals, as opposed to, we can, like I said, as adults, we're distracted too. Let that phone vibrate. Bet you go pick and look at it. You pick it up and look at it. You know what? Well, as men, we don't come with vibrations. So you have to be able to pick up on those senses of another guy and say, hey, yeah, I know this person. Especially people you know. Sometimes people you don't know, but especially people you know. And have that dialogue and discussion, because men are not going to tell you right away. But if they feel that you expose yourself, or for lack of a better word, make yourself vulnerable or whatever, hey, this is what's been going on with me, and they might talk about it. So I think when your question in terms of, what sort of makes me tick now is that side of empathy.
Empathy. Yes. Yes. This is amazing. This is so beautiful, and I took some notes here. because I want to offer this to whoever is watching us in terms of possibilities for this new man, right? Redefining the role of masculinity, right? And you said some amazing things. For example, look, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have empathy, right? Drive your life based on integrity, humanity, right? And virtue, right? Virtue, for those who, you can always go on Google and see lists of virtues and everything, right? Benjamin Franklin has a famous book where he describes 13 virtues, right? And I become very, very attached to this concept of virtue because it's applicable to everything in life, right? Courage, right? Kindness, love, wisdom, and all of that, right? And at the end of the day, if we base our value as human beings in those things, right? The rest is the rest, right? Okay, the success and the career and everything, things will happen because the foundations are strong and the foundations are in the right place, right? So this is one of the offerings. I think the other offering, Chris, very important topic you brought about the social media. And so to everybody who is watching us, look around men around you, look kids around you, older men, let's revisit this role of mentorship. Offer to be a mentor of a young kid, offer to be a mentor or to be a friend with somebody who is struggling. To your point, ask the right questions and offer an arm there to help the person, right? Fine, social media is out there, but let's offer this support that is based on deep and true conversations, right? And adds so much more value. So let's revisit that, right? And at the end of the day, that's my final take, and I'll open to you, Chris. But define the masculinity the way it works for you, right? Don't just take it for granted. Don't take it for granted and say, okay, that's what they told me. That's how I need to behave. That's how I need to be. No, really revisit and think, what's going to work for me, for my development. What's going to work for me to leave a legacy, to make this place a better place, right? So, Chris, any final thoughts you have, and also if you want to share with us, maybe your email or where people can find you.
Yeah, sure. Just to close out and on this, these words always resonate with me whenever I go to a homegoing service or funeral in my culture. We call it a homegoing service with an individual, especially if it's a man. And people speak about the person. And when they start up and say, he was a good man because, so you always think about if someone had to be at your funeral and talk about you and they say he was a good man because, how would they describe you and how would you want to be described? Again, for myself, is to be someone who was honest, had integrity, was empathetic toward others. And I think one that I didn't talk the most about as a man is being a cheerleader. When I talk to some of my friends, the male, and they give me some good news on something, I am their biggest cheerleader. I'm saying, that is great. That is fantastic. It could be a small thing because you know what? We all have egos. It helps our ego, and it might help us reach for something bigger. And you know what? By being that cheerleader to someone else, you know what that person's going to do? They're going to be a cheerleader to someone else as well. So, with that, think about how will you be described when someone said you were a good man because. Start that sentence and fill it in. If you can't fill it in, it's not a problem. Just work on it.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, Chris. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This was
Yeah.
an amazing conversation. We could spend hours here. Maybe, who knows? Maybe we do part 2 and we continue. But thank you, guys. Please leave your comments. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like here. Let's use a little bit the algorithm in our favor. To disseminate a conversation that is meaningful, and hopefully for all of you, it was helpful to drive some insights, to drive some actions, and to help you think, to revisit the idea, the role of a man, the role of masculinity to you. Thank you so much, Chris.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for having this great platform, Danny.
Thank you.